Hello Club Brick members, Scario here, and today I will be talking about LEGO Star Wars sets from my childhood. These Star Wars sets were actually some of the very first Star Wars sets, and some might even call them retro, or classic. These sets were released back when most LEGO sets said LEGO System on them. Now in addition to it saying LEGO System, it also said Star Wars, and this Star Wars logo design right here brings back a lot of nostalgia for me. So today's set that I will be reviewing is 7131, Anakin's Podracer. Now, I don't remember exactly how old I was when I got the set. I do remember my parents got it for me. I did some research on Brickopedia. This set was released in 1999. This set, of course, was part of the Star Wars Episode 1 LEGO sets that came out. Anyway, so in Star Wars Episode 1, there was a scene where basically some of the residents of Tatooine, if I remember correctly, would race these vehicle-like things called Podracers. That is, if you haven't seen Episode 1. So let's see, at the time that this was released, 1999, I was about 8 years old, I think? And man, did I love this set. Before I actually go in depth talking about the set and the pieces, something you should probably know about not only the Star Wars series, but other series as well, is that the minifigures were actually very different back then, because today their skin color is specifically colored to match the characters in whatever series they're in. Like Harry Potter has skin colors of the actors in the movies, whereas in Star Wars back then they used the default yellow because that was before they started using actual skin tone colors. So if you look here, this is the classic Anakin LEGO minifigure with the yellow, the beige pants, the beige shirt, and the helmet for Podracer. Now over the years they remade sets, and the newer Podracer Anakin looks more like this. Skin tone more accurate to the character in the movie. Shorter legs, because he's a boy, not an adult, and skin colored hands. Okay, now to the real interesting part. So this set, you might notice, looks kind of clunky. It has a bunch of beige parts in the middle. What those actually represent is the sand on Tatooine. But the reason why they even put that in the model in the first place is because without those pieces, it's really flimsy and doesn't stay together well. Which makes sense because sometimes you have to do that with models. Anyway, what the whole thing looks like together is kind of like this. So I know this image is kind of blurry, bear with me, but that's what it would look like. We have the pod right here, we have the two engines, the flaps. These orangish transparent pieces are to basically represent the energy beams that are going between the engines. Now let's compare it to a picture of the actual Podracer. See, the old set actually doesn't look the most similar to it, but the thing about the Star Wars sets that you probably notice over time is that they've remade some of them. That's no different from this set. Now before I talk about the remakes of this LEGO set, let me show you some specific pieces that I really have always liked because of this set. Because sometimes when you get a LEGO model when you're really young, whenever you interact with pieces that are similar to that model, sometimes it'll give you a nostalgia feeling. It'll give you a feeling of like, hey, I still have, pieces of that model, kind of. At least for me, that's how it is. So here are all the pieces that can be found in this set. Found them on Rebrickable, and the ones that I've always liked the most are these ones that look kind of like a cannon sort of thing to me, like the ones that are used for the laser beam that connect from engine to engine. The actual engine pieces that look like this, except they're yellow. And the flaps that look like this, except they're yellow. Now in my collection today, which I had to restart over, so it doesn't have the original pieces I had from the Podracer, I actually have the engine piece and the piece that's supposed to be the laser beam. Unfortunately, I don't have these flat pieces, but someday I'll get them again. Those are my three favorite, most unique pieces in that set. So basically all these sets that I'm talking about can be found on Brickopedia if you look them up. But before I talk about the remakes of the set, there was one that included both Sebulba's Podracer and Anakin's Podracer. They look like this. It also had a third Podracer that came with it. This was basically a bigger set that you could buy all three of them in, which as a kid I wish I could have got this because it was so expensive. That's why I could not get it. Sadly, I only had Anakin's Podracer, but it's better than nothing. And this set also came out in 1999. And just like Anakin's Podracer, it used some of the same pieces for holding it together, like the beige pieces, some of the same pieces for the laser beams, and that's mostly it. Most of the other pieces are kind of unique to each Podracer. So the first remake of the Podracers is basically this bucket that you could buy that came out in 2000, basically just a year later, and it had miniature builds of the Podracers. So this bucket consists of Anakin's Podracer and some other Podracers as well that may or may not have been in the movie, but I honestly don't remember. When assembled, the contents of the bucket look like this. There's Anakin's Podracer, and there's a few others. But that's pretty much it for that remake. Let's move on to the next one. How many are there, you ask? There are, what, at least 4, I think? Yeah, there's at least 4. Okay, so the next remake was another mini build, which kind of looks more like a micro build. It was released in 2003. It was Sebulba's Podracer and Anakin's Podracer. It looked like this. I'm going to jump around just a little bit here with the years. Another one that was released was in 2012. That also looked like a micro build. It's kind of similar, but it was actually built very differently. It's just Anakin's Podracer though, and it looks like it came in a poly bag. Back when they probably first started poly bags, actually. I could be wrong, but I never really saw poly bags around until at least 2010. Anyway, that model was released in 2012 and contains quite a few Technic pieces. Whereas the more detailed one that was released most recently was actually made in 2011. That would be this model. Now the detail on this model is actually a lot better than possibly even the original model. So it uses a lot more Technic pieces, and a lot more newer pieces and special pieces in general. And instead of the beige pieces to keep it together, it uses transparent Technic pieces. You'll notice the Anakin's Podracer one does use those flaps. I can't tell if it uses the same engines or not. It might use a different kind of engine. And it does have something to represent the laser beam between the engines, but even that is a different piece. But yeah, overall these are a lot more detailed. A lot more similar to the pod racers from the original movie. See, now one last note is that you probably noticed that LEGO tends to remake their Star Wars sets a lot, or at least a decent amount. I kind of think it would be cool if they actually brought back the original old sets like Anakin's Pod Racer. I would definitely buy that off the shelf. Heck, I might even buy 3 if they did that. But sadly, they don't tend to re-release old sets as they were. They always tend to remake them. Anyway, that's it for this retro review. I'm Scario. I hope you enjoyed the model that I chose to review. And if you liked this review, be sure to smash like. If you'd like to see more reviews like this in the future, be sure to subscribe. And I'll see you next time.